Welcome to the Gems Podcast with Shom, where we celebrate hidden gems and give them their shine. I'm Shom, longtime record collector, music lover, and music researcher who discovered music in reverse. I started off as a huge hip-hop fan, tracking breakbeats through jazz, funk, soul, and psych rock, and really everything in between. Digging's really endless, and I've always been fascinated by the context, history, and characters behind the music. Some of you may be music experts, OGs who have been in the game for years. Others may be newer and learning, but that's all good. On today's show, we have Mike Wallace, DJ and producer out of San Diego, a beat digger with excellent taste, and a library music expert. Thank you for joining, Mike.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
For our audience, if you could tell them a little bit about what you do.
My name's Mike Wallace. I live in San Diego. I DJ a lot of funk records, disco records, soul records. I got a passion for film music, so I like to make library-inspired music using multiple instruments. Like getting into synthesis and learning a little bit more about that. And I just like being creative however I can. I like learning new things.
Tell me about your kind of origin story, Mike.
Grew up in Nashville. I would say the second that I turned around 20, 21 years old, I decided that I kind of had enough of where I was from at the time and wanted to get out west, like many of us. So packed up my car and just kind of drove out to San Diego, California. During the time, when I was driving out, I'd heard of a neighborhood called Ocean Beach, and it's kind of where the freeway ended, where the 8 ended. That's kind of where I ended up. Nice little beach town. And been kind of, DJing since 2005-ish, 2004, 2005-ish. And started out on Earthbound Radio here in San Diego. Started collecting records through, like many of us did, through hip hop. I was a hip hop DJ. Scratching and beat juggling and all of that was pretty much all I did all day, every day. But like many of us, I got into the original samples and started noticing, the original artists that people were using, and started understanding the connection between the two, and became so fascinated by that my days of beat juggling and scratching slowly started kind of coming to a halt. And I started focusing a little bit more on unearthing records and going to swap meets and record stores, doing that. As the addiction grew and, online became, larger and the eBay market started coming alive, I started buying stuff online and just grew and started meeting awesome people through that. And yeah.
I want to touch on something specifically. I know you mentioned you used to DJ, beat juggling. I find so many people from that time when maybe beat juggling was more popular. A lot of my friends, my closest friends, they've gone on to great things in music because of whatever happened with that, right? It takes a ton of practice, right?
Yes.
Yeah. It's massively creative and innovative. I think you meet other DJs and people and you kind of have this group. I mean, so many people who did that have gone on to be very successful in the music world.
Yeah, it's really cool. I would say that like practicing different scratches essentially is, if you want to compare it, it's kind of like practicing different licks on the guitar or piano, and the better you get at it, the more, you can speak with also, the better you get it, like learning how to cut and paste scratch hooks together, because that's the whole, the production end of it is a whole other beast. It's very similar to the production end of, building a song and writing a song. So they're very similar in a lot of ways.
That makes a lot of sense. Hearing your music, I can tell your kind of ability to learn instruments, your composition skills. I mean, I can see the roots.
Thanks. Yeah, a lot of my inspiration comes definitely, other than film music, it comes from a lot of the, like LA underground mixtapes that I used to listen to, as far as from a production standpoint on where you could actually take it if you're really, really creative and you have a lot of skill. And there's some levels I never even got to, but I'm okay with that. I, just like throwing in my, little piece of it. So,
Yeah. Did you compete? Okay. Okay.
nah, nah, nah. I'm only in competition with myself, man.
Hear you. I hear.
Yeah, no, no, no. There's too many talented people out there.
Yeah. I mean, I did spend a lot of my teenage years going to those battles. I grew up in
Yeah, I enjoy participating in competition, but not as far as trying to compete against anybody. I just enjoy watching it as a spectator.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that got me kind of hooked into music. Like, at least as a kid, going to
Yeah,
battles, seeing my friends in battles, cheering for them, sometimes
yeah.
traveling with them. It was an awesome
That
time.
was that was a huge part of my life.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Let's talk about the world of library records. I would consider you a library music expert. Tell me, and for our audience, what if you kind of lay out the land at library 101, the basics?
Library can be confusing because you just don't really see it too often in stores. And then a lot of times when you do, it's just kind of lousy library that's not really that good. The covers aren't really that enticing and the good stuff's already been kind of snipped out. So it takes a little bit of hunting to get through the minutia of library. But essentially it was large production houses that made film and background music that people could license for television and film. That's kind of how it was done back in the day and still is to a smaller degree. And there's a lot of really, really cool experimental labels that made just awesome music. And there's also a lot of labels that made, you know, pretty hokey corporate training video type music. And it's not so desirable, but yeah, that's basically it. And it was never sold to the public. It mostly just sat and was either thrown away for tax reasons or just kind of shifted from storage unit to storage unit and until online, until people started uploading it into blogs, which is something I participated in many years ago, and until people started exposing it online, people really didn't know what it was. So, and also people were, before online, of course, digging it and finding it in various record stores that it would come in.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to start. I think it explains it for someone who's just getting into this world of digging. Now, as you know, you've been in this for a while, it gets massively deep. It gets massively deep. It's not easy to follow. Like you said, the covers don't indicate what's on it. So lived in the UK like early 2000s, and I started seeing all these labels, KPM, DeWolf, and Brunton, Themes International, right? And I heard of them, but when I was in the Canada and the US, the shit was just very expensive and I didn't know anything about it. Like if I'd go to a
Um,
record fair. And then in the UK, I started getting some of them and I mean, it was expensive, but it was like just more available. This is in London. I almost felt like when I was discovering it, it's like, oh, I'm too late. Everyone told me like, oh, these are all all dug up. Nothing's actually, as time passes, nothing's fully exploited, right? Especially if you think about production. I mean, there are people sampling these things today and doing a great job, right? Let's go on the deeper levels, right? Maybe if you could highlight, if we talk about some of those labels I mentioned, some of the big records that you think are a good place to start.
I mean, you pretty much nailed it. I would say with the British stuff, like Themes, KPM, Music to Wolf, those are some really, really nice labels to start because I think that they can be really, really funky, very reminiscent of like Isaac Hayes' production of the 70s. And that can be a little easier on the palate than maybe some of the, experimental electronic stuff that people might not quite have a taste for yet or ever, so and that's not saying that the Italian stuff is also experimental and electronic. It's just saying that you have to do a little bit more digging to get to there's wonderful labels like Sonora Records that are putting out a lot of reissues of some of the stuff that we used to have to do a lot of research to find. So they're definitely a good place to start. But yeah, I would start with some of the British stuff and, you start getting into themes, you start recognizing various themes, like People's Court, get into like the Hangman stuff. And then you start recognizing it's like the lineup of like the Mohawks guys. And then once you kind of start connecting all of that stuff and, you're like, oh, okay, they made something called like the Moody Gentle Rain. And, you listen, it's incredible. I think I even have another one behind me called Misty Collage, back there, which is another, album by the same guys. So, following some of their work the outside of the library world into, some of the soundtrack world is pretty cool too. That's a good place to start. And it's also very, very like rich with a lot of material to go through. The Italian stuff, a lot of it was, which was makes it so desirable. They only made like a couple hundred copies of it. They only made one label, they had one label. It's a micro label, maybe had like two or three releases on it. So you have to do a little digging and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for our audience, I mean, it's good education. A lot of that world, I spent money in directions where I didn't come up with great library stuff. I mean, that's part of digging.
That can happen.
Yeah, you're gonna buy shit and you're not gonna know what's on it. That's just part of life.
Yeah.
Uh, I got some great ones, but I always felt in the back of my mind, there's so much more for me to know. So that's one of the reasons why I'm glad.
Yeah, it's a very common theme with me that I would, get inbox like messages from people on Instagram or friends from all over that they come up on a collection. They're just kind of taking a video, like, which one do I get? I don't know. Like they all look cool, but I don't know what to grab. So I'll kind of help them cherry pick, get this one, leave that, and that's happened in the past. And it can be a bit daunting if you're, not into it.
Yeah, I mean, it has this air of mystery around it. It's just harder to learn than the rest of buying records where you could see the artist or take a guess. And also the fact a lot of it is European makes it kind of cooler for if you're in North America. And the third part I'd say is the artwork, the typography, the design is sick. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, you have a record behind you that looks dope. I mean, I have the same record basically, right? And
Mhm.
it is so just like it's such a vibe. It makes it even
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
enticing. Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah. So let's talk about the world of Italian soundtracks, right? I'm a massive film nerd
Mhm.
and watch a lot of old movies, exploitation movies, all kinds of, let's say fringe films. And the Italian Gallo movies are some ones that I love. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I'll share like a little anecdote. I remember I was in college in the UK. I had very little money. Being in Europe, spending money from Canada, it makes you very poor. I was poor anyways. I remember going to Florence on like a discount flight and I brought a Goblin. It was like a it wasn't an original soundtrack. It's an old Goblin comp. And I was
Right.
so happy, like just seeing like, oh, I went to Italy and I bought Goblin, right? This group that I love. And there's a guy sitting beside me in the airport lounge and he was traveling with a vintage Hammond keyboard. He was a musician. And I started talking to him and he was really just started like sunning me. He's like, that's not even an OG. He was like giving me shit. And I remember feeling like kind of bad about getting this Goblin record. I still have that Goblin record. I love it. And
Mhm.
I just realized, man, there's a lot I don't know about Italian records. This guy was schooling the shit out of me. I couldn't afford anything anyways. So
Well,
for our audience, tell us about the world of Italian soundtracks.
well, I mean, in your defense, and the words of my friend Keith and Juliana, I don't think that there was exactly a goblin tree that you could have picked them off of in your backyard either. So,
There you go.
OGs and Italian originals are just simply not something that you see surface too often. And when I've seen them found, they're usually found in boxes all at once, and they go out to collectors pretty quickly before they even hit the open market. So, I'm sorry, what would you ask? Refresh my brain again.
Yeah, yeah. Tell the audience a little bit more about the world of Italian soundtracks, some of the major records, some of the things to look for, and just an overview.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I would say like look on record labels like Chinadelic, like it's a great label to start with, and they're pretty much I would say look at the artwork of Sandro Simoni. and he designed the artwork for a lot of these Italian soundtracks that you see. Fabio Frizzi did a lot of the zombie soundtracks that you can see, which is, goes into the lovers of horror music and horror movie VHS collectors and all of that stuff. But there's some different lanes, right? There's like the giallo stuff, and then there's like I generally just followed a lot of actresses too. You start to see like Barbara Boucher, anything that she was in. The soundtrack is most likely awesome and expensive and rare for some odd reason. um, but I just would, Ennio Morricone is another obvious, heavy hitter when it comes to the soundtracks and that whole entire world. And labels. There's even labels like RCA had a SP kind of series that they did. That's only a couple hundred copies were pressed, and it's a lot of Italian soundtracks that are on that. And it looks just like a regular RCA label, but really rare and doesn't really ever pop up anywhere. So there's a lot of different lanes when it comes to the Italian soundtracks you could go. But I'd say the Chinadelic stuff is a great start, and Fabio Frizzi's work is great as well.
I mean, you're educating me, so I appreciate it. I mean, it's something so mysterious about those films and those soundtracks. I felt like sometimes when I was watching, I've seen a lot of Dario Argento movies, right?
Perfect.
Goblin, yeah,
Yeah.
Goblin does the soundtracks, and I felt like I'd be watching them. It was like digging while watching a movie. It's like this shit's fire, and I'd look it up. I was okay. Oh, no wonder it's so good. It's Goblin, right? I mean, for our audience, I cannot recommend enough Goblin and the film, The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. The movies are so sick, so entertaining, great exploitation films.
Yeah, that's a wonderful film.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I've seen other ones, Profondo Rosso, and, of course, Suspiria. These are great legendary films. For
Yeah.
any of our audience, it's the best. Now, you yourself has helped put out reissues.
So I did a release of I did basically like I made a mixtape of all of Piero Umiliani's work back in like 2016 ish, and decided to take all of the tracks that I had put on that and feature it as a 2 LP compilation. And I did that. I released that with Nature Sounds, and it was great. We licensed it through Emiliani's daughters, and they're still doing a lot of the reissue work that you see today. They're very busy with his estate. In addition to myself, that you mentioned earlier before the interview, I would say they're the largest reason you're seeing a lot of his music popping up on your algorithm and feed. They're doing a good job.
Yeah, well, I mean, I give you credit. I'm sure there's a lot of people involved, especially the artist who made these great records years ago. Piero Umiliani, I mean, terrible pronunciation, is coming up on my algorithm regularly, and I felt late to the game. I don't think I'm late to the game. It just was reissued and became repopularized. That's how things go so much in this world. I mean, I think it's good.
I think a lot of the stuff that I think everything comes to us when it needs to. A lot of the things that I felt late to the game on are now things that I'm, speaking on. So I don't think that feeling ever goes away. I think everything comes right when it should.
I think that's well said. Yeah, it's like I used to have the anxiousness, like I don't know this shit. I mean, no one's evaluating my digging knowledge, right? And if they did, who cares? Secondly, there's always more to discover. Like in the world of reissues, I mean, there's things that are coming out that were so inaccessible, so expensive, and they're becoming more out there. And I don't think that's going to end. That's a great thing.
Oh yeah, I think the more you know, the less you know, right? The more you expose yourself to, the more you're aware of how much you don't know, and that humbles you. So to hell with anybody who questions your lack of knowledge or where it may be.
You're right, Mike. I'm not sure if you've ever met a record snob. I've met a few in my life, few snobby record dealers in my life too. So yeah, it happens. It happens. Uh,
Part of the game.
yeah, it's part of the game. I mean, music people on this level are often eccentric, and that's all right. That's part of the character. But that's life. I like it.
Dedicated.
Yeah, yeah. So you yourself are a producer, and your music is fantastic.
Thank you.
Super, like some of it's like atmospheric, some of it's dangerous, and it does remind me of the library records we were talking about. Tell me about your transition to focusing more on producing.
Yeah, I would say that, through where it all started was wanting to, be able to express myself on on some form of radio station and airwave that I could, have my friends check out from back home or whatever it may be. And that was my way of kind of scratching my creative itch, right? And once that radio show kind of shut down eventually, and I got a little bit more into expressing myself through making mixtapes and doing what I referred to earlier, the kind of cutting and editing on the scratch hooks, and that was really nice. That lasted for many, many years. And I think once I got to a point where I felt satisfied expressing myself creatively doing that, then I kind of got a bit deeper into, doing records and making more mixes, doing heavier, deep records and record reviews with my friends and, you know, things like that. And I think once I got to a point where it no longer, I couldn't really express myself artistically. I decided that the best way to do that would to be to learn to actually play an instrument. Um, I wanted to play a lot of instruments, and I also wanted to get a little outside of the MPC world and making beats that I was previously doing, mostly because, once you get those out of the machine, there's a whole other back end production process that I just I never really got into. Because I think it was so overwhelming, much like library music is for a lot of people, and they just don't do it.
Yeah.
So, I decided that I was going to, like do an internship and learn the back end of kind of like putting things together and working with compressors and EQs and understanding proper signal routing and all of the things that scared me away from being creative the way that I wanted to, the technical part of it. Right. So I did that for about 6 months. And once I kind of started building my own recording studio by looking at, liner notes of records and noticing what drums they were using, what synthesizers and Fender Rhodes and all these instruments, the digger in me, of course, tracked the instruments down. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
once I got all of them, I have this room full of instruments. I didn't really know what to do with them. So I had to learn to play them. So I started taking music theory lessons through a guy named Matt LaBarber. And that lasted for some years and basically just practiced every day like a student and did scale work religiously, you know, um, until I kind of figured out how to put chords together and make some sense of it all, and just started kind of hitting record. And that was it. And just kind of started, adding things in and different textures. And that's what started the theme and beat workflow, was getting out of the drum machine way of thinking and kind of just getting into a more experimental textural way of approaching a production with a little understanding of theory in mind to make it make sense and not just be this kind of ambient mess.
I would say it's both sophisticated and it's atmospheric, as in you're leaving a lot of space, and it really creates a vibe. I mean, it would do well as a library record. So I hope you take that in a good way.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I think space it's crucial. I learned that from the Italians, who I think are the kings of the kings and queens of tension and release and tension and release. And I think that a lot of my production is centered around leaving room for the instruments to breathe and allowing the instruments to, you know, to do what they do.
It's dope, right? I really think it's good, and I'm glad I came upon it. I look forward to listening to more of it.
Thanks.
Yeah. You
And I'm
moved?
working on other stuff too, like I'm currently working on acid house and disco and kind of developing my formula for that. And there's a lot of homework that goes into understanding the roots of that style of production, just as if I were to make dough. And there's a style that you must kind of understand, I think, before you decide what you're gonna, jump in and do respectively. So that's kind of also what I'm doing now that, we'll probably see some years down the road, hopefully.
I think that's a very respectful way to reverse engineer music that you love. You're drawing, I mean, I would bet you're into a wide variety of older music. Most people who dig are spanning genres. I think you're being very thoughtful about how you study things and kind of make them new. It's a
Yeah.
cool way of doing it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that there's also the workflow is really for me, for myself, the workflow is really important. I have to have a fun workflow that keeps me entertained to continue to, paint whatever auditory picture that I'm painting. I got to have the correct tools, and that kind of stuff inspires me.
It sounds massively, it sounds like 70s, early 80s could be in a film.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
I use an 88 key Fender Rhodes.
Okay.
It's got a wonderful built-in tremolo. Um, I use a console that is from the 70s. I think a lot of the theme and beat stuff was recorded through old Tascam EQs. And a lot of it was tube, and every bit of it touched tape when it ran through a Space Echo. I would almost say that every single track on there in some way touched some form of tape, whether it was the Tascam 388 or the Space Echo. Um, and everything is pretty straightforward as far as the signal flow: preamp, compressor, console, and just kind of understanding how to kind of space it all out, and at least to my taste. But yeah, I would say there's some classic things. Some try to find some old vintage EQs. They always sound nice and warm. And try to find an original Rhodes. Although I love using a Nord, I think that the Nord has got awesome sounds in it, especially for the Rhodes and the organ. I also use an original organ. I try not to make any rules. I don't know. I'd say stick with the Fender Rhodes and also a clavinet. That's a great Fender Rhodes and clavinet are a great start to
Yeah.
make it some stylish, funky 70s music.
One of the things I do in the show is I reverse engineer um, older records I like, and I just look at the instruments and whatever I can gather, right, about it.
Mhm.
Did episode James Mason, Rhythm of Life, talked about the ARP
Days of Art Odyssey on that one. Yeah.
Odyssey, right? And
I think that's interesting. Yeah.
yeah, it's cool. It's cool to learn about for me. I think our audience likes hearing about it too, right? We have
Yeah, I gotta be
record.
careful, I gotta be careful because I I could go on a tangent and just talk about that kind of stuff forever. But it would also bore the pants off of people that aren't really into this stuff. I mean, I know that this stuff wasn't something that I was particularly as into as I am now 15 years ago. So if that version of me was watching this and wanting to learn more about records, they'd be like, ah, man, get that crap out of here. So it is all fun stuff, but in good time.
I think you're being very generous, as in you're sharing a lot of information. Well,
I mean, we got to be careful. I mean, these are rabbit holes, and they might not appeal to everybody.
well, you've been digging for a minute, right? And yeah, like I said, you're very generous with the information you're sharing. A few things. I've talked to a lot of people who have been digging in different eras. Eras where sharing what record you're buying or sampling is not, it's basically a secret. And there are rules around that. Like you might have heard of like different stories of people looking at who's buying what, or even the like early 80s, 70s people covering record labels. I think that went on to like the 90s even. And I think in this world, sharing is cool. Like I think it's a good thing. Could like anyone could two people could sample the same thing and make something completely different. And I think it's part of what I like. I personally like to share stuff. I don't want to blow up anyone's spot. I get it.
Yeah, I would say I've always felt the same way. I also didn't really come from that era, and I've always felt no matter what that I'm a vessel for this music. All of this stuff will eventually move through me the way it always has, and I don't want to have any attachment or feel like I can't let go of anything except for my family, my dogs, my cats, my friends, and the things that matter. So I would say, from in an era where like there was a specific sound in a record that like your crew I get like identified with, and that was a way that people it, it's a whole different time. You know what I mean? And and also when it comes to exposing what music people are sampling, that's not really. I'm old school when it comes to that. I don't fuck with that. I don't do that. That's not really my, that's just not my, that's not a way I like to garner attention to myself. And that's totally fine for people that do. I'm not, you know what I mean? I just don't know the legality, the back end of what their situation is. And they could still be trying to keep that a secret for all, probably not.
Yeah.
But I don't want to be the person to rock the boat. So I'm old school with that. But other than that, for everything that I used to do on my blog, I used to do extensive research and make sure that it hadn't been reissued yet and that I wasn't basically stepping on any toes. And that's also what would make people come to the blog because you couldn't really get anywhere else. So that's kind of, that's there's certain rules, I suppose, but these are the only ones I play by.
I think that's more than fair. Firstly, you're a massively nice guy. I'll start with that. Now,
Thanks.
and you're old school. You know the rules, so you're respecting the rules. I mean, I know the rules too. I'll just say that there are people, nothing against them, but they're like 20 years old. They're born in the 2000s, and they have no idea about these rules. I mean, why should they? It had nothing to do with their life. So you might see online people blowing up samples. I mean, same day. Like record comes out, same day. It's on the internet. And
Yeah.
I would hesitate to do that, but they don't know the rules. Like what are you supposed to, it's a tricky thing because they have no idea like why something's like that.
I mean, I guess in the long run, the question you have to ask yourself is this what I want to do? Like, do I want to be known as the person who tells everybody is that going to continue? Is that going to sustain my creativity in this world of the arts that I'm participating in? And, I think that's the bigger question we ask everything. And it could be, and there's no judgment, but you could also be ruffling some feathers in the process. And I would also say in today's day and age, most people that are making any money off of any samples have got those paid, cleared, and that's already taken care of. So it's just me operating in an antiquated method, really,
No,
on my approach
no, you're
that
right.
in today's world is, but that's just, I'm okay with that.
I think you're right. I think it's a fair thing to talk about. I'll say I don't want to blow up people's shit on this podcast. I don't really. I mean, everything I talk about is mainly known. However, I'll just say like I had a few different people on this podcast. One guy, Phil Most Chill, great guy, and he's very familiar with these rules. Like he was dealing to people who made big records in the 90s, early 2000s.
Phil's
And
a wonderful man.
yeah,
And a
great guy.
big influence.
Yeah. Okay. So and yeah, he definitely he follows the rules all the way. Great guy. Oh, it's a Clips record that came out this summer. Might be familiar. So Be It, Arabic sample. So the way the release of that record came, there was a video and a snippet released on the internet before the album came out as kind of promo. And I just want to say this song is hot. I love the song. It's an Arabic sample.
The original sample. Right.
Right.
Okay.
Saudi Arabia.
And you said it was only available on YouTube.
It was only available on basically a video they made on Instagram, a snippet video, not the whole song. So like
Yeah.
you could not buy it or listen to it on streaming platforms. And so it was like, let's say 2-3 weeks before the release of the album. And by that time, people found who it was and it was visible. And the morning it came out, I use both streaming platforms like Apple Music and Spotify. And on Apple Music, they had to use a different beat, right? And on Spotify, they used the same beat with the Arabic sample. And the Arabic song was on someone's mixtape, and I'm assuming Pharrell heard it or someone gave it to him. And I read after Swiss Beats was contacted by the Clips or Pharrell or whoever and flew to Saudi Arabia and organized for that sample to be cleared. So yeah,
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, on that level of what they're making money, like, sure. I mean, that's just a quick business expense. I mean, that's not a big deal. That's easy.
It's a crazy story. It just shows
That's
the internet.
incredible.
Internet blows shit up, and not everything's cleared. And end result, great song.
Also shows you their marketplace insight. They were smart. They knew exactly what they were doing. So
Yeah, yeah. Sampling's not dead. That's another that's another thing proven by that story. Not yeah, yeah, it's crazy. I mean, the things you learn doing this podcast, but yeah, I'll just say
that
it's
is so cool. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, digging doesn't stop.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, some of my best finds were through the internet. They weren't necessarily through, finding it in person.
yeah, I learned a lot through it seems like I didn't realize how popular this website was. A website called Soul Strut.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. That's very popular blog back in the day. I didn't participate in it as much. I was doing my own blog then. And by the time I kind of caught on to it, I never really, but a lot of my friends were on it. And that was a classic place a lot of diggers went to.
yeah, I learned a lot through that. I was basically a kid at the time, but I
Hmm.
learned so much. I felt like I got to memorize all this shit. And I learned a lot. And through, like, we spoke about Phil, he taught me a lot too through his
Yeah.
mixtapes or crazy mixtapes.
Yeah. Which one? He's got a lot.
A ton, right? Archaeologist classics were my shit.
You know, the best part about it though is that I mean, they're so humbling. And that's why I just kind of most people you've met that have been doing this for 20, 30 years, some of the most common records they still haven't even heard. They don't know about. And they'll admit it. And that's there's so much music out there. So I'll never learn it all. There's so many things that are, or even records by artists that I have like 9 of their albums. I'm like, wait, I've never even heard this. What? What is this? And it's like, and so these things never end.
Yeah, I like that,
I mean, as long as we're making time for life and things
Right.
that matter more than records, then I mean, if records is your, be all end all, then of course you're going to be finding things at a quicker pace. But, in my experience, that's not the most fruitful way to live.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I do find my ear changes over time,
Mhm.
and it's not uncommon for me to look through my records and find tons of stuff that I slept on even when I bought it. I was just like, there's nothing on this. And I was just wrong. And I
Yeah.
rediscovered stuff. I slept on so many things in my
A
collection.
lot of that stuff that I think that we dug up back in the day that was that like 77 to 84 kind of era, we were like, this thing's silly. He's got like a silly press suit on and he's smiling. It just doesn't really look funky, but then you needle drop, you're like, wow, this is incredible. So there was a lot of those I think that I had to go back through that I just didn't give a fair shake because it just didn't look funky or didn't look cool. So
Yeah. Yeah. And also you could have been a kid when you bought it. Like, who knows, right? Like it's all like it's always fun to rediscover stuff.
sure. Yeah.
I mean, I'll give my personal reflection. I used to mainly listen with a hip hop ear, basically listening to everything, looking for a sample, looking for a break, looking for something that could be flipped. And now I find myself learning mostly, I mean, a lot about like modal jazz and I mean, just the various layers of John Coltrane, so many recordings and yeah, like experimental jazz, some free jazz sometimes. And those are things I slept on completely before. And
Yeah.
yeah, for yourself,
Mhm.
how have you found that your ear has changed these days?
Um, I would say that I like many people got caught up in collecting things that I may or may not have been that interested in, and I think once I started getting more in touch with what it is that I truly enjoy, I realized that a lot of things I could just let go of, and a lot of it was because I got great deals on it at the time or, whatever that may be. In terms of jazz, I would say jazz to me, when I used to dig for records, was always something that in the back of my head, a lot of deep modal jazz, a lot of spiritual jazz, a lot of the Strata stuff that I used to find. There was no way that I was going to pass it up. but I knew my palate wasn't quite ready for it because it just wasn't funky enough, or let's say it didn't have a drum break. We're talking the very beginning date or, phases of digging, right? It didn't have a drum break on it. It didn't have a sample that was used maybe by somebody that I recognized. It was just like crazy fucking music. It was deep. It was like, wow, okay, I don't think I'm ready for this. I'm going to listen to a lot of records that were ended up being spiritual jazz records, modal records, free jazz. I'd never really got too into, but free jazz went in that department as well. And that stuff was a pleasure, once I kind of, my palate grew and I started understanding it a little bit more. And, but I'm totally open to these things happening. And I do the bigger thing here is that we have a spidey sense for what we know is really cool, whether it be a new age record or a free jazz record or something that sparks our interest, but we're just not quite ready for it. I think that gets back to what we were saying earlier that, things find us when we're ready. And just because, you know, like there's so many classic 80s disco tracks that I needed in my arsenal, right? And I had to relearn a lot of these classics, and it was super humbling to not know what some of these absolutely classic tracks were that even I knew the words to. So I would say, being open to allowing your palate to shift in terms of taste and humbling yourself to not get too caught up in what you don't know or what people know that you don't know or any of that is an awesome way to go.
I agree. I would say your experience is similar to what I experienced, especially with those Black Jazz, Tribe, right? Some of those labels. I knew they were good and I knew they were popular. Also, they were quite costly. So it made me hesitant to invest in just stuff I knew less about.
Yeah,
Now,
or even like stuff like Brazilian stuff that's like, no, don't give me that classic samba stuff. Give me the like westernized funky stuff, like that's a phase, because it's easier on the palate. But then eventually that dries up. And you're like, you know what? I'm kind of like over that style. I think I want more of the traditional stuff. And then, yeah, I think being open to that and not being like glued to anything is awesome.
I totally agree. I think that's the exciting thing about it. Like this kind of discovery never ends. It reflects who you are. I mean, back as a kid, I was a more simple person. Now I'm more abstract, right?
Mhm.
I like abstract things. I like abstract art, film,
Yeah.
storytelling. I'm more into the complexity of it when I mean teenagers are not as complex
Or
always.
you've always been like that. You're just getting in touch with it as you grow older. You're like,
I
and
always
that's
been.
wonderful. It kind of highlights what we were saying earlier by not, like get following the train of what should be popular or what's going to get the most likes or whatever it is, what other traps that people can fall in, collecting anything and getting in touch with like, what is it? Like, at some point, some random group of people decided, like, we think that gas station signs are really cool. And everybody started picking up on that. And now a bunch of people collect gas station signs. But it took somebody being like, you know what? That's awesome. I like that design. And I don't care how weird it is. I've got 50 of them.
That's the advantage of observing things over time. You can take things from different cycles and make them new or rediscover. I think that goes for music, records. I think it goes for, like you said, art, design, film. I mean, I think sometimes filmmaking, it's like digging. I mean,
Yeah.
uh, I remember
Incredible.
watching the movie Drive a long
Mhm.
time ago. I think it came out, I don't know, 2012, 2013. And I went to a theater. I remember going solo and I was wearing a suit. Like I had a job where I wore a suit to work. And I went to a theater in New York alone and I was like, this is the best shit ever. And then I just started like looking up like this filmmaker, like where is he getting all these styles from? Like how does someone make this? And I just began reverse engineering it. And over time, I mean, the filmmaker's name is Nicholas Winding Refn, and almost started finding the sample to those scenes. I mean, I just read all his interviews and all of his movies. It's like I found the break for scenes, and that was very rewarding. That I think you could do that with anything. You could learn how to reverse engineer anything over the history of time.
If you're really into it, you will do it. It's I never would have gotten this. I've attempted so many things and either failed them or lost interest, right? And it wasn't because I didn't want to do it. It's because I just genuinely wasn't interested in the process. And like I never would have gotten through any of the musical electronic stuff that I learned. I just learned coding recently. I'll never touch coding ever again. But it took me learning it to be able to say, okay, I don't want to do that, and I think that um yeah.
I think as a person in this world, that's a good example to follow, to try things, to stimulate yourself, to do things that are maybe not easy or straightforward, to gain a appreciation because you don't know how it's going to help you in the future.
Well, I think that's yeah, it really does highlight what we're talking about is, the ability to allow your palate to shift, right? Because there's a lot of like, you know, maybe when I was a young beat digger, and me and my buddies would get together and smoke weed and listen to drum breaks, like maybe I was a little scared to be like, man, I'm really digging this ambient record. You know what I mean? But it was like, nah, I don't want to, it's so I think that the inability to allow myself to be honest, can have an effect on the way you collect. And it also comes with maturity and all of that stuff too, of course. But yeah,
Yeah, I know. I like to reflect all.
honest with like what you like. Right. And also, it took me over 20 years to finally say it can all go for the most part. I don't care. Like I would never die with anything. I don't ever want this music to stop with me. I want it to always go through me and to go to somebody else and let it enrich their life the way that it has for myself. I never want things to be like, I don't want to be like a hoarder. I don't think that's for myself personally, it's not a very healthy way to live. I think I like to be like that with my friends and family and things that matter, like I said. But these things in music and records are just wonderful, things that accent my life and
I mean, it's very healthy. I think I wasn't always like that. I think I see the the value in
oh,
what you're saying, and it gives
definitely
me
not.
perspective. Like, I remember once I was making a mixtape and I had like a crate of my best shit, and I just don't know where that is. And it bothered me for years. Like it had my hottest stuff that I was gonna put
Yeah.
on this, right? And I was practicing like the transition, and something like I don't know where the fuck it is, right? And it bothered me for years. But really, who cares? You know,
Gotta let it go.
it's
Gotta let it
not
go.
even their problem.
It doesn't matter. You got the experience and, I mean, I'm with you. It's all about the ride. Again, it was the journey to make the mix. I mean, it definitely can be frustrating and losing stuff, but yeah, I think it's more or less, I mean, that's like all the stuff that I made for Theme and Beat. I was just sitting on that stuff. It took somebody who's in the record world and people to coming over to be like, dude, you got to get this stuff out of here. You got to release it. And, I was still very caught up in that constipated, stagnant way of thinking before, overthinking things and just not allowing things to be what they are. And actually doing that led me to the path of being able to let go and sell things I never thought I would, that I now feel totally liberated by. And I have a healthier relationship with music and records now than I've ever had. And healing myself from that attachment to them has been the best journey that I think I've ever put myself on musically.
Thanks for sharing that. I think our audience can benefit from that kind of talk. And artists, collectors, music people, really anyone, people have their idiosyncrasies and hang-ups over time. So I think it's good to talk about them in this massively specific lens, but I think people could benefit from it. Yeah, absolutely. What's up next for you?
I'm working on myself. I think the better version of myself I can continue to make, the better the music's going to be, the better friend I'm going to be to my friends, and continue to build an awesome network of people who are doing the same. And I think that's just focusing on setting goals by, recording every day, whether it's, saying, okay, I'm going to track out drums today and not focusing on anything but drums. just getting on drums and tracking out drums and just focusing on that and learning when to call it a night and get some exercise, take the dogs for a walk, be present, get off my phone. Um, I would say that's the biggest battle is getting off of the phone and getting less screen time and being more present. And all of that, enriches, my life and makes me a better musical person. So, um,
Can we talk about that for a moment? I mean, you're a creative person. You're working on music daily. How do you keep a level viewpoint?
I would say by, again, it gets back to staying off your phone, being present, and dialing back the basics that really, really do make us happy and build serotonin and because when my brain is full of that, it's incredible what I can create. But when I've tapped out of it, it just feels like work trying to create anything. And I found that the only thing that truly recharges my batteries and keeps me sane, like you're saying, is less screen time, more time with solid friends, spending less time with people that I perceive as cool or whatever it may be that aren't necessarily watering the flowers of my life. And everything else comes after that. Having understanding that music too and creating is work and it's not fun. And that I used to think that the creating process and that being a musician, I used to think that it was just like they could just sit and they just poured all of these things out of their head and they're smiling the entire time. But the reality is to like put something together, you have to hear it a million times over. And even by the 10th time, you're like, I'm over this. And you have to go, no, stop, like you're over this because you're creating it. Nobody's heard this. You have to imagine what this would sound like fresh. And getting through that is you know it's tough. And it's easy to start things like mixtapes and get 5 songs into it, and then just get caught up in you know the toils of life and never finish it. And my hard drive is full of that. So I would just say that understand, and I thought that that day I would just be able to bang it out quickly or whatever it may be. So I say just having a honest understanding that it'll take work, and then you just got to chip away a little bit every single day. And as long as you're chipping away a little bit every day, and having and not overloading yourself with expectations of, you know, doing something that you can't or something that you don't have the time to do, and keeping that healthy balance it's the way to go. And that is not the way that I've gone, by the way. This is the way I've learned over time. All this stuff I'm saying is not whether it's, but I've developed through putting extreme amounts of pressure on myself and causing lots of anxiety and overwhelming myself with just way more of a load of, chores and things than any person should ever do. And I don't know if that's the healthiest way. So that's why I'm speaking on keeping things at a happy, gradual pace.
Yeah, thanks for exploring this topic with me. And you're right. And it sounds like I mean, it is coming from a place that you've learned to be at.
This works for me. Some people grind it out and enjoy making music till 4 o'clock in the morning. But for me, if I don't
There's a
have,
limit to that. There's a limit to that. It
you
causes
know,
all kinds of problems. I mean, I've seen it
yeah,
in life. I mean, if you grind, whether it's being a musician or some other pursuit, you hit this wall and it could lead to all kinds of unpleasantness. And like half of this life is being able to manage that, you know?
yes, you don't want to be a grumpy person because then you're not fun to work with.
Yeah.
And I use, and then once again, like it's all about getting in touch with yourself. For some people that works for them, and that's awesome. Like, and I think for myself, even I thought that unless you were up till 4 o'clock in the morning grinding it out, that meant that you weren't really doing it. And I didn't see the value in sleep. And once I started dialing it back down to the basics, I was like, oh, okay, I need these things in order for me to be able to have a consistent output, you know. And once you get in touch with what it is, for you as an individual, whatever that is, and not what people tell you should do, you know, unless it's like drugs or something, I don't recommend that. But, you know, getting in touch with whatever it is that your thing is, I think will be, it's good. And not listening to too many, people telling you what you should do.
I couldn't agree more. It's been a pleasure having you on. I think our audience is going to love everything you spoke about. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. And yeah, appreciate it, brother.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Peace.